Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Numbers chapter 28 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's just quickly look at our agenda for today's explainer. We're going to cover context and daily offerings, the Sabbath offerings, the monthly new moon, Passover and unleavened bread, the Feast of Weeks, and finally, practical lessons and recap. We'll be moving chronologically through God's strict calendar-based agenda for the Israelites.
Section 1. Context and daily offerings. Setting the rhythm. We're beginning right here in verses 1 and 2, where God establishes the context by commanding Moses to have the people bring his offerings at exact appointed times. The text literally says, "Give this command to the Israelites and say to them, 'See that you present to me at the appointed time the food for my offerings made by fire, as an aroma pleasing to me.'" Who is this for? Well, it's for the whole Israelite community. What is it? A highly structured system of dedication. And why? To maintain a constant, pleasing relationship with God through a very precise schedule. Now, before we actually look at the specific animals, we really need to understand what these burnt offerings were. They were entirely dedicated to God by fire, serving as a pleasing aroma. In Hebrew, this is called an olah, which literally means an offering that goes up. Unlike some other sacrifices where the priests or the people actually get to eat a portion of the meat, a burnt offering is placed entirely on the altar. It represents absolute 100% dedication and complete surrender to God. So, looking at verses 3 through 8, the daily rhythm is established with 2 lambs. They have to be a year old and absolutely without defect. One is offered in the morning and the other at twilight, every single day. Think of this as the steady heartbeat of the ancient Israelite camp. Before anyone does anything else, a lamb is offered in the morning. And then as the day winds down, right before the night begins, the second lamb is offered. It's a continuous, unbroken cycle of daily devotion, and it really emphasizes that the animals must be without defect, basically bringing only the absolute best to God. Now, what's really interesting here is the precise recipe that accompanies each lamb. It blends fine flour, pressed olive oil, and a fermented drink poured out at the sanctuary. You see, the sacrifice isn't just meat. God commands that it be accompanied by a grain offering and a drink offering. Metaphorically speaking, it's a complete meal. You've got the meat of the lamb, the bread from the fine flour and oil, and the wine for the drink offering. Just to clarify these ancient Hebrew measurements in simple English for us, a tenth of an ephah is roughly 2 liters of flour, and a quarter of a hin is about 1 liter of oil or wine. So every morning and every evening, a beautiful, unblemished lamb is offered up along with about 2 liters of fine flour mixed with oil and a liter of wine poured out on the altar. This happens 365 days a year, absolutely without fail. Section 2, the Sabbath offerings, building on the base. As we look at verses 9 and 10, we see how this devotion builds as we enter the weekly rhythm of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is the 7th day, a day of rest, but on the altar, the devotion actually increases. So, the absolutely crucial point here is progressive stocking. On the Sabbath day, the Israelites offer 2 extra lambs and double the flour, and this is entirely in addition to the continual daily offerings. That means, say on a normal Tuesday, you have 2 lambs total for the day, but on the Sabbath, you've got the morning lamb, the evening lamb, and then 2 extra lambs specifically for the Sabbath, bringing the total to 4. They don't replace the daily routine at all. They build right on top of it. Section 3, the monthly new moon, a massive expansion. Next up, verses 11 through 15 introduce the monthly rhythm tied to the first of every month, known as the new moon. In the ancient biblical calendar, the months were strictly lunar, so the appearance of the new crescent moon marked the start of a new month, which was a very important time for the nation. The monthly offering requires a massive step up in scale. They're bringing 2 young bulls, a ram, 7 unblemished lambs, and a male goat specifically designated as a sin offering for atonement. Notice the big shift here. We've gone from just lambs to a massive presentation of bulls and a ram. And actually, for the first time in this chapter, we see a sin offering introduced. While the burnt offerings represent total dedication, the goat for a sin offering is really about seeking forgiveness and starting the brand new month with a clean slate. And this brilliantly illustrates the strict mathematical proportionality required for the grain and drink offerings. It perfectly scales the flour and wine up or down depending on the size of the animal. God is a God of order,
If you bring a massive bull, you must bring 3/10 of an ephah of flour and half a hin of wine. A medium-sized ram requires 2/10 of flour and a third of a hin of wine, and the smaller lamb requires 1/10 of flour and a quarter hin of wine. It is just a perfectly balanced, logical system. And here is the crucial takeaway. I really want to emphasize that even with all these bulls and rams, they absolutely do not replace the daily, morning, and twilight lambs. The calendar obligations stack on top of one another. The text specifically says in verse 15, besides the regular burnt offering with its drink offering. So the foundation of the daily lambs is never compromised, no matter how grand the monthly festival gets. Section 4, Passover and unleavened bread, the spring milestones. Now we shift from the daily and monthly routines to the major yearly milestones in verses 16 through 25. Having established the base of the calendar, God now commands the annual rhythms, starting with the very first month. The text specifies that the 14th day of the first month is the Lord's Passover, and that's immediately followed by a 7-day festival where only unleavened bread is eaten. The 14th day remembers the actual event of the Exodus from Egypt, and starting on the 15th, the nation enters a full week of eating matzah, or bread without yeast. This symbolizes their hurried departure and separation from the old ways of Egypt. During all 7 days of this festival, the exact same massive offering required for the new moon must be presented every single day. Just look at verses 19 through 24, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 male lambs, and 1 male goat for a sin offering. I mean, just imagine the scale of this. What was done just once a month on the new moon is now repeated 7 days in a row. It is an intense, concentrated week of absolute devotion. Furthermore, the first and 7th days act kind of like Sabbaths, where the people must hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. It's about dedicating their full focus entirely to God. By pausing their normal labor, the Israelites are commanded to completely reorient their attention away from their own personal economies and back toward the God who actually provides for them. And yes, verse 24 reminds us again, this is all in addition to the regular daily offerings. Section 5. The Feast of Weeks, the Summer Harvest. Turning our attention to the summer milestone detailed in verses 26 through 31, known as the Feast of Weeks or the Day of First Fruits. In Hebrew, this is known as Shavuot. This festival marks the agricultural transition into the summer wheat harvest. On this particular day, the Israelites celebrate the harvest by presenting an offering of new grain, holding another secret assembly, and resting from their regular labor. It's a day to acknowledge that the success of their crops, literally their very survival in the land, comes directly from God's hand. So they bring the first and the absolute best of the new grain as a tangible sign of gratitude. Consistency is really key here. The animal sacrifices and their accompanying grain and drink measurements are actually identical to those offered during the new moon and the unleavened bread festival. That's 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, and 1 goat to make atonement. And Moses is instructed once more in verse 31, be sure the animals are without defect. God's standard doesn't lower just because it's a different season. The requirement for purity and bringing our best remains absolute. Section 6, Practical Lessons and Recap, moving from altar to heart. As we conclude our step-by-step walkthrough, let's distill the key simple ideas and practical life lessons we can take away from this ancient text. Because while we obviously don't have a physical temple today, the principles of Numbers chapter 28 are still deeply relevant to how we structure our own lives. We really have to ask ourselves, why did God institute such a meticulous, unchanging schedule of dedication, demanding unblemished animals day after day, month after month? It might seem a bit repetitive to us, reading list after list of bulls, rams, and lambs, but this structure was designed to shape the very character of the nation. The answer shows us the supreme value of consistency. True dedication is built on a daily foundation of bringing our best, upon which our larger weekly and yearly milestones are stacked. You just cannot have the massive celebration of the Passover without the quiet, unnoticed faithfulness of the morning and evening lamb. Spiritual growth isn't just about massive moments of intensity. It's about those steady, daily commitments. We bring our best, without defect, day in and day out. So to quickly recap, we've clearly tracked the progression from the 2 daily lambs to the Sabbath additions, the new moon expansions, and the exact repetitions during the spring and summer festivals. We saw how the exact grain and drink measurements were scaled logically to match the offerings, and how the entire calendar was an unbroken chain of connection between the Israelites and God, always building upon that foundational daily rhythm. Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.